Welcome to Let Them Talk. I'm your host, Paul DiRienzo. We have another great show in store for you. And my guest joining us for the first time is Kee Ko. Welcome, Kee Ko, to Let Them Talk.
Thank you so much for having me.
Great to have you on. And you're here for a number of reasons. I guess first and foremost is that you're really you're interested in TV and you're interested in video and public access video. And this is what better way to learn about public access than to do it? And that's what Let Them Talk is for, and what the studios that we're in right now are for, giving people from the community an opportunity to get on TV. Thank goodness for this great resource that we have. What got you interested in TV?
What got me interested in TV? I think it was from me when I was growing up in Hong Kong. I just watched TV all the time. We had to have the TV on all the time, even though when I was doing homework, I would be watching TV, and then I would make sure that I watched the 6:30 news every day. Like my family's was like that.
Right.
So yeah.
That's sort of was how I got interested in it too.
Oh yeah.
And the things that the events of the time, when I was growing up, were so dramatic that drew me to the TV almost like a light, like a fly to a light or something like that. I couldn't stay away from it. So here I am. So what are your plans? Like, would you like to have a show like this, or do you want to be like a newscaster or a host or anchor?
Yes, actually, my major was journalism. I studied journalism in college, and what inspired me to have my own talk show, a talk show like this.
Yeah.
Maybe I was mainly the TV news that I got into.
Sure. Sure. So what's it? What do you want to communicate to people? What do you want to ask them? Television is about the visual communications, right? It's about seeing things, right? And it's photography is a love of mine, because I love the photographic view, and how photography can really make you so emotional. It's such an emotional thing. I mean, reading is great, an article is great. I love to write articles, but it's always the picture that people remember. Right? They always will remember. There's nothing more exciting than a photograph or a picture. Do you want to go out and bring mind-bending images to people? Is that part of it, maybe, to excite people with the images that they see?
Actually, that's not what inspired me. I remember seeing a scene of an interview then on TV, and I was like, one day I want to be the person that interviewed this person and getting their response. So
great.
Yeah. Well, let's go back to why. Like recently, I wanted to do a TV show.
Sure.
It was actually because of the Hong Kong protest. I got inspired by the Hong Kong protest. I was invited to a radio show to talk about the Hong Kong protest. And then they were telling me that actually, if you want to have your own show, you can have your own radio time there. Then I was thinking more about it, talk show, then why not do it on TV? So with the advantage of TV is that you actually get to see the response of the person right away. On radio, you don't see a response. And I mean, it's part of telling the truth, even though they might not be saying the truth to you. You can read it by the facial expression.
I see. It's true.
Right?
It's very true. Right. You can
Yes.
tell a lot by watching somebody. So you growing up in Hong Kong, watching television, seeing interview shows, and then being inspired by events. What kind of events were happening in Hong Kong that inspired you? I mean, we've seen the news and everything, but I'm not sure really what's real and what isn't.
Yes. So starting last year, June, we started a bunch of protests. Basically, it was because of the inefficiency of our government. We have this chief executive, Carrie Lam, who was not, basically everything she has been doing was pro-China, not pro-Hong Kong, pro-Hong Konger. So at that time she was doing the extradition law. She was trying to promote the extradition law. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that law.
I've heard that term. I'm not familiar exactly what that law means. Who would that affect? I mean, we have extradition here.
Right.
Some countries don't extradite to the United States. Others do. Interpol, Europe, if they catch a criminal who's wanted in the U.S. and France, they're on their way back to the U.S. pretty quick. I mean, but then there are instances like Julian Assange, the famous leaker, whistleblower, who the United States wants to have sent back here from England, but England doesn't want to send him back. For political reasons, because the U.S. laws are so strict. They're much stricter than the British laws for the same crime, so they don't want to send them back. Is this something like that was happening in Hong Kong?
Yes, it is exactly something like that. Basically, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Chinese regime, also with the law over there. So maybe we have some discrepancy about laws, like here in Hong Kong. I mean, I'm not in Hong Kong right now. I'm in New York. In Hong Kong, we can be talking about Carrie Lam, our chief executive, and saying like how bad she is, blah blah blah. When we sometimes also talk about President Xi, like he looks like Winnie the Pooh, blah blah blah. But in China, that's not allowed. So if you're applying the law in China, and you're saying in Hong Kong, that doesn't work. So basically, what they want to do is that China has to would have to, if the bill got passed, they would have the rights to get whoever they want
for saying things, right? So
to send back to China. Yeah.
Like here, I can sit here and smile and say, President Trump, he's orange-haired fool, a pervert, a fanatic, a fascist, the worst, ignorant slob. A guy eats McDonald's all the time, right? I could go on, and I have,
Right.
and I would go home and sleep comfortably at night knowing half of New York agreed with me and not have any, but you cannot do that in China, right?
Probably you can't do that in China. I mean, you can talk about Trump, but you can't talk about President Xi.
Right.
And you can do that in Hong Kong, but not
what's
in
it different?
China.
Why is it different in Hong Kong? Isn't Hong Kong part of China? What's the history?
Okay, that's a great question. So Hong Kong used to be a colony, a British colony, and we returned back to China in 1997, July. And so it has been under the Chinese rule. No. We were guaranteed that we would have 50 years of unchange of our system. We are protected by this basic law, which is a law that is agreed by both of the Hong Kong government and the British, and they created it together. The system that they create together. So we are guaranteed that until 2046 or 2047. So technically, everything should be the same.
As it was before 1987.
Right. But then it seems like it has changed too much that we're not adjusted to it.
Right. So they're ignoring that and just moving forward with the change, and that people notice that, right? They notice that happening, and that brought out who is this a youth protest? I mean, in the United States, we had back in the 60s and 70s. Big upsurge of protests. I wish we had that now. See, it's another thing I can say in the United States. I wish we had big protests against Trump. I wish we had protests so big that Trump was literally forced to resign from office. You guys hear me? Get out there in the streets and protest today, now. I can say that.
Wall Street protest didn't go very well.
No, it didn't.
That was just like,
that's it, right. We didn't get millions of people. We did get a few thousand people. That was pretty good by U.S. standards. So in other words, the protests here, are you saying, are not really threatening to the regime? My saying the things I just said are not threatening to Donald Trump.
I wouldn't say that. If you remember...
Politically threatening is what I mean, of course.
Well, I think every movement takes time. You cannot expect something to happen within a few months. Like back in 2014, I think we had our umbrella movement and basically it was like a bunch of people, young people, occupying central or like the central area of Hong Kong, the financial districts of Hong Kong. And they had been, they just occupied it. They slept there.
Yeah. So it was an occupation. It was like occupying.
Right, but then but they were blocking the roads, so the buses couldn't go through.
Right.
It was kind of annoying for a lot of people who had to work.
Sure.
Right, so it only lasts until the end of the summer holiday.
Oh, people had to go back to school.
Right, right.
And
So people.
So
yeah, then we were like, oh, so that lasts only for a few months. But then that was, I think this time now is like a continuation of that protest,
right.
Even though there was like a few years in between.
I see. So and it was because of this law to be able to send people to China for breaking Chinese laws in Hong Kong, which was a British colony for many years, right? But didn't people want to be independent from England? Wasn't there a desire to be independent from England? With the imperialist British Empire.
There was like a 1960 late 60s. There was like a small group of people that were doing that. But again, that's a great question. I think you can answer that yourself too. Why wouldn't there be a protest being against England? I think people can answer that
the
too.
The economy was good. If you could go back and forth to England and fly back and forth, you were a citizen of both countries, basically.
Oh no, England wouldn't allow us. We have like 7 million people.
Yes.
If everybody moved to England, that wouldn't be good. So I think at that time, most of the government officials, also their children had the rights to live in England. Right.
I see. Right. So there wasn't really people didn't feel that there was. I got the impression it was a feeling more of national pride. It was a time of anti-colonialism at that time in history. A lot of African countries and a lot of countries in what was then called the Third World were throwing off American and English empire and imperialism, what they called it at the time. Those days are long gone because there really isn't that colony anymore. You don't have those colonies in the world. We could argue if there's neo-colonies but this is different because it seems to me like China wants to absorb Hong Kong and just make it another Chinese city, like Beijing or, Shanghai or something like that. Just another part of China. Why don't people want that?
Why don't people want that?
Yeah, in Hong Kong. And what's the alternative to it? Maybe that's the question I want to ask. How can you find? Is there an alternative?
Well, people, interestingly, there was like a poll, unofficial poll, on Facebook saying that if you want, what would you want to see happen in Hong Kong? What would you want to see happen later if we succeed, or what would you want to see later in Hong Kong?
Yeah.
Should we just be independent, or combine with Taiwan? Or return back to England, or just be another Chinese city?
Yeah.
And take a guess. What do you think?
I would
Number one.
Join Taiwan or join England.
I
don't think join China. I think because.
Right. That was the last choice that people.
I've had students from South Korea teach English who've told me. We don't want to, young people don't want to, we have so many poor people, we have more poor people than you think in South Korea, and what do we want to open up our borders and allow millions more desperately poor people in? We can't even take care of our own. Same thing happened in Germany. When East Germany, the wall came down, it was a big problem for Germany. All of a sudden they had to absorb. This is the opposite. The much more advanced, like strong economy of Hong Kong would be attracted into a much poorer, generally, society of China. You hold down your standard of living. Maybe.
I mean, that's what's happening right now. That's what we're fighting for. A lot of people. Let me just answer your question and then go to what I was saying about Hong Kong. So number one would be being independent. Number two is combined with Taiwan. The number three would be returning back to England as a
and
colony.
Only number four would go back to China.
I mean, I only see the three. You know, like on Facebook, you see they would be like, oh, if you wanted to be independent, click like. If you wanted to be with England, do like a smiley face. So like with Facebook, you only see the top three.
Right.
So when you were talking about what's happening in Hong Kong now and why it's not just the extradition bill. Basically, it's more like they are allowing a lot of people coming into Hong Kong as tourists, and every day they are allowing 150 people to move into Hong Kong as like from the mainland as permanent residents. And imagine Hong Kong is only 1/4, a quarter of the size of New York.
Okay.
And we have 7 billion people. If every day we have 100 people moving in, how many?
That's 150 apartments, or as many as if that's one apartment per person, right?
Right. I mean, there's no way we can have we have enough apartments for everybody.
Right.
But even the 150 for 10 days is 1,500.
Right. Well, every city has. There's no city in the world that doesn't have a housing crisis that has to house people. The rents are high in every city in the world. It's difficult to find a place to live in every city. New York, for sure, right? So you're saying that people coming in will make it difficult displace the Hong Kong or eliminate the idea of a Hong Konger, of someone who's a resident of Hong Kong as the way I would, I say I'm a New Yorker, right? And in many ways that makes me different from an American, but I'm very much an American. There's no difference between them. But there seems to be a difference between Hong Kong and... Well, tell me more about the protests themselves. What are let me put it this way. There's a lot of students, a lot of people here in this country on the left. I'll put them, who I hear from a lot. Not everybody for sure, not even a majority. Just some people on the left who say that this is this is George Soros, the color revolution. This is just another attempt by the United States to overthrow a communist government that provides for its people in some way or another. Is that what's going on here? Is this an American? I don't think it is, but how would you respond to people who say that?
Sorry, what was that?
This is the purpose of the rallies and the demonstrations in Hong Kong is just to take down a communist state on behalf of the United States,
right.
On behalf of the capitalists and the imperialists and all those kind of people.
Yeah, you were saying that some people in Hong Kong are saying that is actually
in this country,
the U.S. Persuading people in Hong Kong doing that, starting the protest.
Cause trouble for China because they're conflicting, because they think China is a communist state and provides for its people, and his equality reigns in capitalism. I know you're laughing.
I mean, no, I'm not laughing because my mom was saying that to me. They're like, "What are you? What have you been reading in the U.S.?" Like, I mean, I don't read it here. I was like, that's not true. I mean, most of the things I get are from the Hong Kong media.
Yeah.
The information, and I mean both Hong Kong and U.S. media, and at the same time, I don't think that's true. Like, I've been telling you the situation of Hong Kong.
Yeah.
Like, for example, the 150 people. Actually, it's not. It's a lot more than 150 people. But I'm just calculating the official number. But there are like tourists, also like people with special visas. Mainly from mainland. I'm talking about from mainland China,
right.
And it actually has been disturbing the livelihood of Hong Kong. The people, the neighborhoods, people just want to live a normal life.
Right.
Just
it's
go
like gentrification in a way, like here, is kind of
right. Like people just want to go to like a local mall and buy stuff, but then there would be like tours of Chinese tourists occupying the restaurants or.
Right.
And also they bring up because of the of the demand, it goes up, right? So the price goes up. The price of the housing goes up too. That's
Right.
also
Driving up the prices, yeah.
yes, that's also a complaint of the Hong Kong people. A main complaint of the Hong Kong people. If you see, if you read any of the article or survey, Hong Kong's housing is always number one in the world, the most expensive.
Yes, yeah,
in
more
the
than
world.
New York, even much more
Right.
than New York, higher than New York. Land values are higher than here, and they're astronomical here.
Right.
So this is it. So this sort of like it reminds you of the fall of the Berlin Wall, but in reverse. When the Berlin Wall fell, you had a lot of Western money come into Hungary and Poland and all those countries, and they bought up all the land on a fire sale, really cheap. And now people in Poland and Hungary are surrounded by Americans and British and French people and Germans, and they own a lot of the land in these countries. They bought it up. But here's the opposite. What you're seeing is that the Chinese people are going to come into Hong Kong, and they're going to buy it up.
Yeah, I've heard. Yeah, exactly. And also.
That doesn't sound very socialist or communist. For the Chinese people, I mean, it's supposed to be a socialist country, believing in equality. They're coming in and buying up all your land.
Do you think China is a communist country?
You tell me. I don't know.
I don't think it is a communist country. I mean, it is a capitalist style communist regime. Does it make sense?
The worst of both worlds.
I think 1978, it was Deng Xiaoping that started the open door policy, so people could start doing businesses in China. So since then, it had not been a communist, really like a pure communist country.
Right. In some way, it's sort of like a hybrid, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, whatever works for them. But they act like, China's gone all over the world, and it helps. I have to say, it helps a lot of countries, but it still does it in the same way the U.S. It's competing with the U.S. by offering better deals, but it's still the same deal. Like it goes to Angola or Africa and builds a railroad across the country at a better deal than the Americans would. But still,
the road and belt thing.
Right. Different ones I've seen. I've been reading about recently. The one that crosses Angola. There's one that goes into Zambia. They rebuilt these train lines that had been destroyed by civil war and were long left in neglect. It's helped these countries. But then, sure enough, the bill comes due, just like with the U.S. They have to pay back for that.
I'm not in the position to talk about China. I just want to.
I just find that interesting. So that's good. Okay, I won't. I find that something I was just reading about, and a lot of New Yorkers really see a country calls itself whatever it calls itself it is, and that's the bottom line. But what we're saying here is that's not necessarily true. It could be other things going on. So how about Hong Kong? What is Hong Kong? Is Hong Kong capitalist? Is Hong Kong a socialist country? How do they run? Or is it just like New York?
Right. Like I said, we were guaranteed 50 years of unchanged. It is called one country, two systems.
Yeah.
So we have our own system. We have our own government, technically, supposedly. Then right now. Because of the extradition bill, they wanted to revoke that.
Yeah.
In a way, they still would be like, hey, this one country, two systems is working fine. But so many ways, you can see that it's not working fine. And then we started a protest since June. I think the first one was that 1 million of Hong Kong people came out and protest. That's 1/7 of Hong Kong people came out on the streets to protest. And Carrie Lam, the chief executive, just ignored us. And she was just going to proceed to the bill like nothing happened.
Yeah.
And And then, like a few days later, somebody went up to the building and stood there for like 8 hours, wearing a coat, writing slogan and stuff. And he jumped off the building to protest.
Yes.
And then that angered people. I mean, no, that didn't anger people, but I mean, of course that did. But then the next morning, 2 million people came out.
2/7, so it's double.
Right.
So this is like a large, like it's almost, that's enough. If 2 million people come out, there's another 2 million who support them.
Right. 2 million of Hong Kong people came out to protest, and she still like was really like what for? She still basically didn't want to listen to the people. It was not until like 2 months later that she was like, "Oh, the bill is dead." What does it mean by dead? If you use the real word, the right word, it should be canceled or revoked or something. That would be the right term. You cannot say the bill is dead. What does it mean? She's just a very stubborn person that doesn't. I would say like we wish she could listen to the people more. And like right now with the coronavirus, I think that's.
Yeah, we only have a minute left. I have to have you come on again and talk about the coronavirus. What are they, is the coronavirus threatening Hong Kong? Is it in Hong Kong, or are people keeping it out? I know there was fear it would come, right?
The thing is that with Carrie Lam, she's not really keeping the virus. Like blocking the border, keeping everybody safe. That's what angered us too. Yeah. So.
And that's part of her position in a way. It's her political position.
Right. Correct.
Not so much that she doesn't know how to do that, but she doesn't want to do it.
Correct.
Right.
She doesn't want to do it to protect the Hong Kong people.
Right.
Even though she's from Hong Kong.
Right.
Grew up in Hong Kong.
Okay,
so.
30 seconds. What do you think is going to happen next, Kee Ko?
We just keep going. I don't know what's going to happen next, but everybody's doing whatever they can.
There's been threats, too. Are you worried about violence or threats, the military coming in?
Oh. Not sure. I don't know. We don't know. I don't know.
Right. So it's a fear, though, in the back of people's heads. They could come in like they did Czechoslovakia or Hungary or something like that and put it down.
I don't know.
Oh, my gosh. So that's where we leave it. All right. Thank you very much for joining us, Kee Ko.
Thank you so much for having me.